science.
Suffice it that the blood of 1,000 men and women was spilled in these walls. Limbs twisted and broken, eyes gouged from bloody sockets, flesh burned black.
Please. No way for dead. In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes. What you have to realize is that we're all just a mouse that a cat has by the tail.
The number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
How are you, David?
I'm very good. It's a different challenge these days. When I first started talking about these subjects, it was like a man and a dog when the dog turned up. But so that was a pressure in itself. It felt like banging your head against a wall and getting a very large headache. But now the challenge is coping with all the interest. So it's a much nicer challenge, I can tell you.
We saw your interview just recently with Wogan. We had the beginning interview back years ago, and then we had the new interview, and I can definitely understand how it's changed over time. People are starting to see some of these things actually come to fruition now.
I think that's a great point. I said years ago there's going to come a window of time when all that's remained hidden will break the surface where we can see it, because when you're manipulating behind the scenes to bring about changes in the world, you can manipulate unseen for a while, but then suddenly the changes you want start to appear. They have to if you want to introduce them and make them part of everyday human life. And we're now at the point where those changes, those fundamental destructions of freedom, are being seen by more and more people. And for me, there's like a tinderbox out there, and that is the feeling, conscious and often subconscious, that something's not right in the world. Something's going on here, and it's not good. And the spark, if you like, that will set that alight is the information calmly and simply explained about why the world's not right, why things are happening in the world, and what the agenda really is. And I know from my experience that when people hear that, then lights start to go on, because it's igniting this underlying feeling that something's just not right here.
Very well. Well, I guess we'll start at the beginning. If we can, we'll just try to briefly cover things. How did you personally get involved in all of this, and what was that moment when you said, "Aha, there is truly something not going on right in the world"? Was it a slow build, or was there just a point where things just sort of fell into place for you?
Well, I could talk for 3 days about this, because I have had some extraordinary experiences. And to go back to the start, I was a professional soccer player, and then a journalist with the BBC and newspapers, radio and television. Then I became a television anchorman, and then I was also a spokesman for the British Green Party for a while. And then in 89, from the kind of around 89, the middle of 89, I started having some strange experiences. And it was when I was in a room and there was no one there, the feeling was that someone else was in the room. I mean, lots of people have had this feeling from time to time. It was a constant with me. And eventually, I remember sitting in a hotel room when I was working for the BBC, just across from where the BBC headquarters is. And I remember sitting in the room one night and on the bed and saying, "Look, if there's something there, would you please contact me, because you'll drive me up the wall." And then about literally a few days later, I'm playing soccer with my son. down the seafront here where I live, and we were going to have some lunch in a little cafe at the railway station right on the seafront. So we went along, and it was full of people, so we decided to go somewhere else. And as we came away, someone stopped me, started talking to me, and after a while I realized that my son, who's now a rock singer, but in those days was a little boy, was missing, and I knew where he would be. He's in the little newsagent shop on the station. And when I walked in, I just said to him, he was reading a book or something on one of the shelves, I said, come on, Gaz, we'll go up in the town and get some lunch. And as I turned, it was as if two magnets were pulling my feet to the ground. It was an extraordinary experience for someone who was kind of new to all this. And then as I felt, what the heck is going on, I heard this, what I can only describe as a voice. It's more of a thought form which we decode into an apparent voice in my head, which said, go and look at the books on the far side. And so that was the only way I could move. I couldn't move any other way because my feet wouldn't move. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, what on earth is going on here? And I walked across to these books, and the first one I saw had a woman's face on the front, and I was attracted to that book because it was so different to all the others. And I turned over and looked at the blurb, and I saw the word psychic. And I thought immediately, I wonder if this lady could tell me what this feeling is I've got of someone being in the room constantly when there apparently is nobody. And so I read the book in 24 hours, and I wrote to her, and I went to see her, and I didn't tell her why I'd gone. I told her actually the truth, that I had rheumatoid arthritis, which I have, and kind of drugs, medicine is no good for it. So I wondered if her hands-on healing, which she also did along with her psychic stuff, would be any benefit. That's all she knew, really. And I went a couple of times, and it was all very nice and interesting chats about other dimensional realities and all the rest of it, which I was open to, but had done no studying of at the time. And then the third time I went along, I'm lying on this bench in this room, and she's kind of working on my knee about a few inches away, hands-on healing and all that stuff. And suddenly I felt like the spider's web on my face, and this took me aback because I'd read in her book, she said that when other dimensional forces are trying to log into you to communicate, you often feel like a spider's web on your face, which is kind of strange because I've never felt it since, but it was really strong then. And I'm starting to think, oh my goodness, what's happening here? And I start to slip down the bench, all this being new to me. And then suddenly within, 10 to 15 seconds, without me mentioning what was happening, what I was feeling, this lady launched her head back and said, my God, I've got to close my eyes for this one. I'm going even further down the bench now. What is going on? And then she said that she was seeing this figure in her mind. This is 1990. What would it be? March 1990. And she was seeing this figure in her mind, and it was saying, asking her to communicate things to me. And take into account that at this time, I'm a television presenter with the BBC, and a national spokesman for the British Green Party. I'm not into any of this stuff whatsoever. It's finding me. And suddenly, out came this stuff that I was going to go out on a world stage, and I was going to reveal enormous secrets that had to be known, that what one line was, one man cannot change the world, but one man can communicate the message that can change the world, that there was going to be tremendous opposition, but they, whoever they are, will already be there to protect me. And what happened was, after that, and there's loads of other stuff, but what I'm thinking is, this is ridiculous. But what happened in the months that followed is the synchronicity of my life started to lead me to people, not that I was looking, who started to tell me things that related to many of the secrets that are going on behind the scenes, beyond the movie version of reality, as I call it, which we get through the mainstream media and politicians and all the rest of it, and education or what passes for it. And this then started to build and build and build, and what was a trickle of information to start with just became a tidal wave. And it's taken me now to more than 40 countries. It's taken me to so many situations that I've observed to learn from, and so many people who've given me information. So and I would go to a book in a library, be attracted to it, pick up the book, open it, and bang, are we looking at something that was related to what I was working on? So whatever the background to this in terms of who they are, and that's not something I spend a lot of time thinking of. I just do what I believe to be right. What was told to me through that psychic in 1990 has demonstrably happened. In fact, virtually everything has happened.
Huh. Now, I heard your interview with George Nuri the other night, and on Coast to Coast, and you had talked about we had now come to this point where we're at a fork in the road as far as what's going on and what's happening in the world. Can you describe to our listeners what you meant by that, this fork in the road?
Well, what's been happening over a very long period of time is that a network of interbreeding families going under different names, because the names often change as they pass through history, but the same, if you like, bloodlines, they have been working towards total global control, and I cannot really epitomize what they are desiring to impose upon us more than George Orwell's 1984. This Orwellian global state of total control, and where everyone is in effect a biological robot, and not least microchipped and connected to a central computer, which people found hilarious when I talked about it 10 years ago, but they're not finding it so funny now, as microchipping is already being introduced. But these families have been working towards the centralization of global power, because without that, they cannot control the many, the mass, if you like. If you look at any dictator in any country, what dictators want to do, and always do, because they can't be dictators otherwise, is to centralize power, centralize decision-making, so that only a few are making the decisions that affect the rest. If you go back, we were once in a tribal situation where the individual tribes were making decisions over their lives and what was going on and what they did and how they did it. We then had an amalgamation of tribes, which we called nations, and at that point the all former tribes were brought together under a centralized control, if you like, centralized government, which we called the national government. Now we're in the process, certainly we're well advanced in Europe, of bringing those countries together so that they no longer make decisions about their own destiny. They are made at a central point, in our case the European Union, which dictates to all the former countries that were making their own decisions. I mean, whether you know, but the law is in Europe that any law made by the European Union that is at odds with a law made by a national parliament, the European law takes precedence. So we've lost control of our sovereignty, in effect. And what they want to do the same with the Americas, bringing the whole of the Americas under one government, one centralized dictatorship, the same with the Pacific area, and the same with Africa. I mean, they've already got the African Union now working towards that goal. And it's a simple point, really, that if you want to control the many in the hands of the few, you have to centralize decision-making and destroy diversity and diversity of choice and decision-making. And that's what we're seeing happen. Now, there comes a point where that's all being done behind the scenes, as we talked about earlier. But there comes a point where it breaks the surface where you can see it. We are now at that point, and every day more and more freedoms are being taken away, not least justified by protecting us from terrorism, which when you do the research, the terrorism is orchestrated and engineered by the very forces that through other expressions of itself, which we call presidents, prime ministers, etc., is telling us that changes must be made and freedoms must be taken away so that we can be protected from the very terrorism that they themselves are orchestrating. It's a technique that I've dubbed problem reaction solution, where you create the problem covertly. Could be a 9/11, it could be a government collapse, it could be a war. You then tell the people the version of that problem that you want them to believe, i.e. Bin Laden did it, Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy and all this, and you want them to react by saying in fear and terror and outrage, do something. This can't go on. Something must be done. What are you going to do about it? And then you come to stage 3, the solution, in which those who've covertly created the problem and had someone else blame for it then openly offer the solutions to the problems they have created. I've just described 9/11 to a T, because that's what it was. It was a problem, reaction, solution, horror to bring about what has come as a result of 9/11, massive changes in society and destructions of freedom. As Tony Blair once said, since 9/11, we live in a different world. Exactly, and that's why they orchestrated 9/11. So we're at a point now where increasingly ignorance cannot be an excuse for lack of action or lack of perception of what's going on, because it's in our face. And we're now standing at this fork in the road that you talked about, where we can keep going the way we're going and allow our freedom to be completely taken away, and my goodness me, the world our children are going to have to live out most of their lives in is just a nightmare unless we start to take responsibility for what's going on. Or we can go down the other fork in the road and start to take our control back. Control not just in a physical sense, but control of our own consciousness, control of our own thoughts, control of our own emotions, and start to see through the manipulation, to see why it's happening, to what end, and the fact that it can only happen if the mass of the people acquiesce to the demands of the tiny few. And that's the fork in the road. That's the choice we're facing. And we don't have forever to make that choice now, because this is no sometime in the future this will happen. This is happening now by the day. And because I run a website, davidicke.com, which does a daily news page on all these subjects, it means that I can track what's happening in terms of freedom busting, if you like, and it is happening ever quicker and ever more fundamentally with every passing week.
Yeah, I'd seen the one of the video clips of the 9/11 thing that one of the people that go to your website had posted a link on there.
It was pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, it was.
It goes back to what
you didn't see that on the news.
No, of course not.
And it's government control through fear. I'll give up my. Let me use the Bill of Rights as a floor mat. Let's pass the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
Let's do all these things because we want to be safe, and it's all in the name of our personal safety.
Well, actually, this is the question that I have. Going on that framework. It seems to me that maybe this has been going on, at least in the Americas, for a little while before that, with the notion of the old Cold War enemy. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have to defend ourselves against the Soviet Union, so here we're going to do these things for our own good and protection. David, what do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely right, and we've introduced the key word too, fear. The whole foundation of the manipulation is fear, because once you can get someone in fear of something, they look outside of themselves for someone to protect them from what they've been manipulated to fear. It's an old technique which has been used for centuries. Why? Because it works. And the Cold War was a classic. That's one of the key reasons they dropped atomic bombs on Japan, as I point out in one of my books, And the Truth Shall Set You Free, was because if you really wanted to bring fear, terror to the Cold War on both sides, you had to give people a visual, unmistakable image of what nuclear war means. Without the bombs being dropped, it would have been a theory. Yes, in theory, this is what happens, but those Nagasaki, Hiroshima pictures were just not a theory. They were saying this is what happens, and it was after that. If you go back in history, it was just after that this whole Cold War thing got underway. It was all part of the manipulation, all part of upping the fear levels, and of course you had tremendous contacts and connections between the elite families of America, like the Rockefeller family and the Soviet Union, just as you have tremendous connections now between those families and China and other so-called enemies. I mean, Halliburton, which was headed by Dick Cheney before he became vice president, one of its subsidiaries was making a fortune out of Iraq during the period of the 90s, putting back the damage caused by the first invasion or the war with Iraq, when the defense forces or attack forces of America were actually led by Dick Cheney at the time. So as a politician, he leads the forces that cause the damage. As a businessman, his company puts the damage right and repairs it. So, these connections, what are known as the revolving door between politics and corporations, are absolutely fundamental. And if you see the world in black and white, in us and them, and not in shades of gray, where behind the scenes people that argue and attack each other in public are actually connected, then you miss you miss and lose the plot in terms of what's really going on in the world. Just because people say things about each other and to each other in public doesn't mean they're saying the same things behind the scenes.
Now, I spoke with Clyde Lewis last night. I speak with Clyde from time to time. He's on our network. Really good guy. We actually had him on the show, what was it, about a month ago?
Yeah, about that.
And he talked about the reptilian agenda. He talked about the Antichrist. He talked about how all this plays out. It's all being self-fulfilled by this group that controls. I don't know if you want to call them the Illuminati, if you want to call them New World Order. I guess
Secret
these terms
Society,
are these terms are pretty much synonymous from the way I understand it.
Yeah.
How does this play in this whole idea of the reptilian thing? I mean, as far as the reptilian race, is this tie into the same bloodlines that you were discussing earlier?
Yes, it would certainly appear to. What happened with me is that in the early part of my research, this synchronicity of walking into information, people, experiences that I talked about earlier that followed that first, if you like, awakening, it took the form of uncovering information and understanding of how the world is manipulated today and the structure through which it's done. It's a very simple structure. It may seem on the surface to be complex, but all genius is simple when you get away from the complexity that covers it up and hides the real simple core within it. And whatever people think about these forces, if you like, that are wishing to control us, they may be spiritual deserts, but they're not intellectually stupid. They are very, very, very bright intellectually in terms of understanding how to orchestrate and manipulate human behavior and human response. And what happened was, after a while, when I was uncovering this structure that is in place today, I asked the obvious question, which was, when did this start? Because it was clear by then that you couldn't put this structure together in a few years or even a few decades. And it became clear to me quite early on that it wasn't a case of this Illuminati infiltrating the structure that of institutions and whatever and governments that we see today. They'd actually created the structure in the first place to give the illusion of freedom and choice while fundamentally suppressing both. So it had to go back a while, but how long? And I started going back, and in subsequent books, I got comfortably back to the time of the Crusades in what we call the Holy Land, the time when organizations like the Knights Templar, the Knights Hospitaller of St. John of Jerusalem, now known as the Knights of Malta, and other organizations like that, secret society, secret groupings, were formed that are still going today and still have among their number some very, very famous and influential people. I kept going back, and eventually I'm thousands of years BC when I start to hit a common theme which relates to the question. It was of a clearly non-human race interbreeding with humans to create a hybrid bloodline. And it's from this hybrid bloodline that we get this idea of the so-called divine right to rule, which is what? It's the right to rule because of your DNA. We have a queen about an hour and a half from where I'm sitting who is only Queen of England, only head of state because of her DNA. As I've said before, if she had a different DNA, she might be cleaning the throne, not sitting on it. And it's the same with all these kind of bloodlines when you go back. All these different countries. I mean, you go to China, and the ancient emperors of China claim the right to rule because of their descendants from what they called the serpent gods. And it's something else that you find all over the world, this royal bloodline connected to DNA, which is connected to some kind of infusion of something different from the norm. And after I'd written a book called The Biggest Secret, which introduced this whole area for the first time in my work, I went to speak in South Africa, and I got a call from a guy called Credo Mutwa, who's a very famous shaman, or what they call over there a Sanusi, the highest level of the shamanistic stream, who was initiated into these secrets in Africa decades and decades and decades ago. He's in his 80s now, well in his 80s, Credo. Last time I saw him was last summer. And he said to me, "How do you know this?" And I thought, well, how do I know? How do you know about the Chitahuri? And the Chitahuri in African language translates as the children of the serpent or the children of the python. And he said, "How do you know about the reptiles?" And I said to him, I'd met so many people all over the place who constantly told me the same recurring theme, and then I'd done this research and that research. I said, "Well, why do you ask?" He said, "Because I was told about this when I first was initiated into the ancient African knowledge." Because what he told me was that and this happened in every country, not just South Africa, when the European colonial powers moved in, first the Dutch and then particularly the British, they, in his words, milked the minds of the shaman and then killed them because they wanted to put into place a different belief system in their colonies and destroy the one that was there before. So what he said happened was that the knowledge, the ancient African knowledge, went underground in itself into secret societies and groupings to try to keep it alive and stop it disappearing. And he said when he was initiated into this, he was told about the Chitahuri and the fact that a race of reptilian-looking entities interbred with humanity to create these hybrid bloodlines, which have a particular DNA makeup. And he showed me artifacts, including one that he called the Necklace of the Mysteries. The pictures of it in my books, and it's very, very heavy. It's made of copper. And around it are symbols which people like Credo Mutwa use to tell the history of Africa. And it goes back, he says, at least 500 years, this Necklace of the Mysteries, because it's mentioned in accounts 500 years old. He says it's at least 1,000 years old. And right at the front are two figures. One is a human woman, and one is a clearly non-human figure. It's not reptilian, but what not just Credo, but other people have told me over the years, is that people were told they could not depict the gods in their images as they really looked. And so what he said they did is they depicted the gods as looking totally unhuman, but they couldn't often depict them as they really were because of this fear that they had of what would happen to them. So you had on the front of this necklace a human woman and this figure that's very unhuman. And how can I put it? The extraterrestrial figure or interdimensional figure, the non-human figure, has a penis which is in "come and get me" mode. Right now, on the necklace as it is now, that is copper. But he told me that originally, before it was stolen and had to be replaced with copper, it had been gold. Now we're talking here, guys, about southern Africa. If you go to North Africa and Egypt, you have of course, the ancient stories at the heart of the ancient Egyptian belief system of the golden penis of Osiris, who produced a child, a son of God, Horus, with Isis, the Virgin Queen. You go to Babylon, you have the same story with the woman, the Virgin Queen, being Queen Semiramis, also known as Ishtar or Istar. You have Tammuz, who is the Jesus Horus figure, and you had the Osiris figure in Babylon known as Nimrod, the father god. And this is a recurring theme. Credo Mutwa was saying that in Southern Africa they have similar stories to that. And how can I put it? Again, on the Necklace of the Mysteries, the extraterrestrial non-human figure fits into the human woman figure. And I said to him, what's all this about? And he said, this is the depiction of the interbreeding in ancient times between the Chitahuri and humans to create this hybrid bloodline, which he said also produced the kings and queens of Africa, Black Africa. This is not a racist thing. This is happening through one race. This is universal and global. It happened everywhere. And also, interestingly, hanging from this Necklace of the Mysteries is a very, very clear depiction of what we would call today a flying saucer. And I said, what's that? He said, these were the ships that these Chitahuri came in from the mothership that used to orbit the Earth. And when you think that this Necklace of the Mysteries is accounted for 500 years ago, according to Credo, and it's got a flying saucer on it, and it's no, is that a flying saucer? It's definitely what it was meant to be. You can see it. And so these bloodlines, these hybrids, have then come through history. I picked them up very clearly in the time of Babylon and Sumer, thousands of years BC. And where was Babylon and Sumer? Of course, it was in the land we now call Iraq. That land is very, very important to this Chitahuri, this children of the serpent bloodline. They then moved out of Babylon, not necessarily out of it, but they moved their headquarters and their focus out of Babylon to Rome. And it was in Rome, when they were in Rome, that's when we had the Roman Empire. That's where we had the creation of what became the Christian Church, the Church of Rome. But it's still a massive center for the Illuminati, Rome and the Vatican and the Roman Church. And they then moved up, expanded outwards into northern Europe, where they became the aristocracy and royal families of Europe. And then, as I mentioned earlier, through the empires of Europe, the colonial empires, particularly the British, French too, and others, but particularly the British, they exported this bloodline all over the world, to Australia, to Africa, as we've talked about, to Asia, to, of course, relevant very much to this interview, to the Americas, North America. In particular, when you look at the way North America has imposed itself on the world in more recent times. And then we had this illusion called giving up freedom to the former colonies. All over the world, apparently, independence was given to these former colonies. Well, it only was on the surface, because what really happened is that the bloodline and the secret society network through which the bloodline imposes itself on people was left out in those former colonies and has continued to hold the reins of power ever since. The difference is it's more effective now, because there's two types of control. There's the control you can see, touch, and taste: fascism, communism, apartheid in South Africa, dictatorships where you can see the dictators and you can see the control. And they have a finite life, because eventually there's going to be a rebellion against an imposition that you know exists and you know who's doing it. The greatest form of control is control you can't see, touch, and taste. It's sitting in a prison cell but not being able to see the bars and thinking you're free. And this is what, quote, democracy is all about. It's about giving the illusion of freedom and choice, while, like I said earlier, suppressing both. So the controllers have just gone further underground, therefore become more effective, and they have been manipulating behind the scenes right up to the present time to evolve change in the world that will lead to a world government which would dictate to everyone on the planet, a world army that would impose the will of the world government on everyone on the planet, a world central bank that would control world finance, a world currency which would just be electronic money, an end to individual currencies and to physical cash, and a microchip population linked to a global computer. And if someone had said that 20 years ago, they'd have laughed in their face. They said it 10 years ago when I first started talking about this, or earlier. They would have laughed in my face as they did. But they're not laughing now because that which has remained hidden is now looking us in the eye and saying, we're here. What are you going to do about it?
We're gonna take a short break here.
Okay.
There are some things in this world that go way beyond human understanding. Things that cannot be explained. Things that most people don't want to know about.
But we're going to talk about them anyway. World of the Unexplained with Jay Scott and Trent Blackie. Heard Mondays live from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern on the OmniSound Radio 1 network.
Right here, baby.
www.omnisoundradio1.net.
That was a question basically based upon a lot of that historical information that we just got. And this is also something I mentioned briefly with Clyde, but in the history, in our human mythology, there's been recurring images of serpents and dragons. For example, Tiamat, and in the Epic of Gilgamesh, when Gilgamesh and Enkidu slayed the dragon Tiamat, and of course St. George, defeating the dragon in England, St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland, even in the Bible where the serpent is the great temptator, the great corrupter of humanity. And basically, do you believe that those mythical, and I'm sure there's dozens more across a number of cultures, but do you believe that those images of reptiles also coincide with what we're talking about? And if that's so, then in these stories we also hear of just regular humans, it seems, that are slaying them, they're driving them out, that recognize what's going on and sort of try to take back their own lives by some sort of action. What do you make of that, David?
Yeah, I think that a lot of them are absolutely symbolic of what we're talking about. I mean, one of the things that comes up again and again over the years in terms of one of the prime centers for the reptilians is China. And what is the whole Chinese culture based upon? The figure of the dragon. The same with other countries in that part of the world. And I think China is going to become a very, very significant in not too long from now in terms of this whole agenda. I was saying years and years ago now, at least a decade, that it was leading to a conflict with China, and now we're starting to see people in the Pentagon talking about that and building it up, that they're going to change their military strategy and take into account a possible conflict with China. And the idea is to create a third world war, which would lead to a massive problem, which would have an equally massive reaction. This must never happen again. And the solution offered would be world government, world central bank, world army to stop it happening again. And it's not only the kind of theme of serpents and reptilians that you find. Because I put my head above the parapet and started talking about this, attracting enormous ridicule, of course, at the same time, as you'd expect. I get sent a lot of images that people have taken photographs of around the world, on bridges, in churches, government buildings and stuff, and you realize just how many images there are of this theme of half man, half serpent. And this is symbolic of this interbreeding between the two that create this hybrid. A hybrid that can take either human or reptilian form, it would seem, if you read the ancient accounts and talk to people who've seen this so-called shape-shifting phenomena happen. And in terms of the Bible, I was once interviewed on a really rabid Christian radio station because the radio host, while he would have disagreed with a lot of what I say about religion, of course, he said, I'm having you on, he said, because the Bible is full of references to serpents and reptiles and all this stuff, and therefore you're not saying in that area anything that is at odds with the Bible. So, it is all over the place. And I've talked about this before. When you get into this, it's like we are filtering, and this is fundamental, this side of it too, to understanding how we controlled and sold a false reality. But we are filtering information all the time on the basis of belief, which is not becoming conscious. It's entering the mind, if you like, but it's not becoming conscious, so we're not aware of it. And when people call it subliminal, like we have subliminal advertising, when you see a subliminal advertisement, you cannot often, most of the time, see the subliminal message in it. But when the subliminal message is pointed out where it is, whenever you look at an advertisement from then on, the subliminal message is the first thing you see. It's because that which has remained below the conscious level has suddenly entered the conscious awareness, and then it can't be subliminal anymore, and you realize what's being said. Now, in the same way, things are happening and are all around us that we don't actually see. It's like when there's a new car come out, and you haven't noticed it, and then someone says, hey, have you seen that new car that's just come out? Hey, look, there's one. Look, there it is. Hey, have you seen that new car? From then on, you keep seeing this new car everywhere when you've never seen it before. Why? Because it's entered the conscious awareness, and so it begins to register every time you see it, rather than just being a subconscious thing that you don't register consciously. Now, in the same way, I found this, and I know that so many other people have found it after reading my books and stuff, is that once it registers in your conscious awareness, this reptilian connection, you then start to see this reptilian symbolism and imagery everywhere. I mean, I'd walked through the city of London before I got into this stuff many times, but only after I had this understanding of the reptilian connection did I walk through the city of London and see reptilian imagery everywhere. and so this is why it's so important that this information we're talking about gets into the public consciousness, so that it starts to register, and the manipulation and the imagery and symbolism of that which controls us ceases to be subliminal and starts to be something that we can see and become aware of.
Well, I have the money question, I think, here. And that is, what, and I don't know if you know this or even claim to know this, but what is what's coming down the road if we don't change this path? How do we change it? I guess this is a series of questions. What's going to happen if we don't change the path we're on now? If we do want to change the path that we're on, how do we change it? And 3, if the path doesn't change, why do they want this control? What do they want to do once they gain the full control?
That's a good question.
The first of all, what is coming, unless we change the direction we're going, is a global version of Nazi Germany. No less than that. I mean, we're talking total control. We're talking microchip people, babies microchipped at birth, connected to a global computer, so that every movement can be followed and tracked and recorded. We're talking about being able to do nothing, virtually nothing, in private without the state hierarchy knowing exactly what we're doing. And the microchip is coming in more and more and more. This thing in America called the very chip, which I've been talking about in my books for many years, is now being used on people. And in the 1990s, about 1998 it was, I was asked to meet a man who was a scientist with the CIA in America because he wanted to get out what was going on, but he could not do it himself. And he met me, and I met his family. And he told me that he joined the CIA in his 20s because he was a genius in the area of magnetics, and they wanted to use his genius. And at that time, he thought that he was serving his country, because many people do. This whole thing's so compartmentalized, very few people, even higher-ups, know what's actually going on and why. And he said he soon realized after he joined the CIA that they didn't want his genius to help people, as it could massively, but to control them. And he soon realized that this agenda we're talking about today was reality. And I said to him, why do you do it? Why do you still do it? And he opened his shirt and he showed me this like see-through shampoo sachet, plastic sachet on his chest with an orangey kind of golden liquid in it. And he said, this is why. He said, these are called patches in the CIA parlance. And he said, what happened was, when he realized what they wanted to use his genius for, he refused and wouldn't work for them anymore. And he said he left home one day in this period and then has complete missing time. And the next thing he remembers is lying on or waking up on a medical-type bench in a room and realizing, as he came round, that he had this thing stuck to his chest. And this patch contains a drug that they manipulate their bodies to need to survive. And if the patch is not replaced, and it has to be replaced every 72 hours, then these people start to die. And it's a very painful death. And this is why, as he told me, there are thousands of people who are patched in America alone so that they will use their genius to serve this agenda, when without it they would refuse. And he said that even then, when they think that these people have given them as much as they can, the patch is not replaced so that they die, and the knowledge of what's happened dies with them. That's why he told me he was holding back knowledge that he had, that he knew they wanted, and he was letting them know he was doing it to try to survive as long as he could. And what this man told me was two things. First of all, he was another one of the people that have told me about the whole scenario of leading to a conflict with China. This was in 98, like I say. 97, 98, and he also told me about the microchip, and he said it's not just about electronic tagging. He said it is a technology which allows the person chipped to be manipulated in terms of what they think, how they feel, and their physical health from a distance, just by sending signals and messages and codes to the chip. And he said they can isolate an individual and just target him or her, or they can do it en masse. They can make people aggressive, they can make them docile, they can make them sexually high, they can make them sexually suppressed. All these different things can be done from afar. And with the passage of the years, since he told me that, more and more of this potential has come to the surface. And so that's the kind of world that we're looking at if we don't stand up now and say enough, because the few can only control the many if the many acquiesce to the few. I mean we've got a situation where people that we have no say over, in truth, democracy or no democracy, it's just another name for dictatorship, pass laws, and then we're supposed to obey the laws. And if we do that, then all they've got to do is pass laws, and then we do as we're told. And we have to get through this mental block that so many have in terms of obeying the law. Obeying morality, not killing people, not abusing people, not imposing your will on people. These are basic gimmies. But the laws that are not serving but are there simply to control are not ones that we should be acquiescing to, because if we do, we might as well microchip ourselves now. And if enough people say no, non-violent, non-cooperation, we're not doing it, then these people have no power whatsoever. They only have the power to control us if we acquiesce to the control. And this is where this classic dictatorship in all its forms technique comes from, known as divide and rule. They have to divide and rule us and play off different factions of the people against other factions, be it religious factions, be it political factions, be it income bracket factions, because unless we're divided and ruled, unless we're divided on what we disagree on and we don't unite on what we agree on, which is freedom for all people, then they cannot impose their will upon us, only if we're divided and ruled. And so if we represent a race, we represent a religion, we represent an income bracket, we represent a political view, and we don't care about the rights of others that hold different religious, political views or a different racial background, then in our self-interest, in promoting what we believe and promoting who we believe we are actually, in fact, in the longer term, and not such longer term now, acting in the opposite of self-interest. Because once they've picked off one group by turning other groups against them, at the moment it's the Muslims, then they'll pick up other groups and other groups. And there's that wonderful saying by Pastor Niemöller in Germany, when he talked about the time of the Nazis, how they came for the trade unionists, and I was not a trade unionist, so I did not speak out. They came for the communists, and I was not a communist, so I did not speak out. They came for the Jews, and I was not a Jew, so I did not speak out. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. That's what they're doing. And this is why I keep trying to get across this fundamental fact that everybody's freedom is our freedom. Because if everyone is not free, then we're not free. And if we don't support everyone's right to have freedom of expression, freedom of lifestyle, so long as they don't impose it on other people, then eventually all these different groupings are going to be picked off until they come for the people that think are safe from it all, and they're going to find a knock on the door, and they're not.
Huh.
What do these people want? I guess that was the last part of my question.
Why take
once
over the
they
world?
Take control?
Why are they doing it?
The thing is that when you start going on this journey, if you have a religious belief system or a political belief system, or really any belief system to defend, then you're only going to go so far and you're going to stop. There's a lot of if you like, conspiracy researchers who are doing a fantastic job, and they have my complete admiration and support. They'll go so far. They'll talk about the banking manipulation, the transnational manipulation, cartels and stuff, the political manipulation, the New World Order and the Orwellian state. Great. But they're still coming from a perspective of a religious belief system or some other belief system, be it identification with a nation, identification with a political grouping. And that means that they'll go so far, but they won't go into areas that put the belief system at risk. You've got to come from it if you really want to follow the path, from a point of view of I'm going to let the information lead me and not preconceived idea, because the world's controlled by preconceived ideas. And so as I went along through this, I went through the five-sense level of the manipulation as I talked about. I then hit this whole reptilian area, and then I went on to look at the illusory nature of reality, what I call the matrix, the false reality that we are implanted with and connected to. And it depends what level you're observing from for the answer to the question, why is it happening? On the physical level, the Illuminati are doing it, because they are obsessed with control, and they suffer from a real problem with security and the sense of survival. It's interesting that in the oldest part of the human brain, it's called the R complex by mainstream science, which is short for reptilian complex. It's the reptilian brain. And from the reptilian brain, we get character traits of a desire for top-down hierarchical structures of power, a sense of might is right, a sense of the more that I have, the more secure I am, and the more likely I am to survive. And it's a massive survival mechanism. It's where we get this character trait of fight or flight, where when we feel danger, we either smack the guy or run. And it's this sense of survival that is one of the great controlling mechanisms of the Illuminati, because they have such greater reptilian genetics, these families. They equate control with ability to survive. So that's one level of it. The more, they think if they have more and more money, more and more control, more and more possessions, more and more power, then they feel much better about survival, because they are very, very imbalanced people. And it all comes from the reptilian aspect. One of the other traits of the reptilian brain is a obsession with ritualistic behavior, not just satanic rituals and human sacrifice, which these Illuminati are seriously into, as they have been throughout the centuries, but also with cyclical behavior, like going to the same place at the same time every year, really repeating behavior, same follows same, nothing changes. And when you study the Illuminati, you find that they are obsessed with ritualism and ritualistic behavior. I mean, there's no better example of that than the British royal family, who are one of these bloodlines. Their year is decided overwhelmingly as the clock strikes midnight on January the 1st. In fact, it's before that, because every year's the same. They have certain palaces all over the country, and they go to these palaces in order at the same time every year. It's incredibly ritualistic behavior, and it's a classic trait of the reptilian brain, the reptilian mind. On another level, the Illuminati are possessed by entities operating on dimensions, frequencies just beyond human sight. This age-old idea of possession, another force taking over the mental and emotional processes, is something that you find throughout history in every culture, and constantly also when you look around it today. And you can see possessed people through the eyes. I mean, I've kind of learned how to do it through, seeing people who are in that state, and then seeing how different they are in the eyes from the general run of the population. I've seen politicians who, there was one called Ted Heath, who was Prime Minister of Britain from 1970 to 74. I had an amazing experience with him once in a television studio makeup room, when his eyes looked at me and went completely black. I mean, the whole of the eyes, the whites as well. And when this happened, it was like looking into two black holes. There was no eye contact, because there were no eyes to make contact with. And I was not into any of this stuff at the time, but looking back from what I've learned over the years, it was clear that I was looking through him into another dimension, into another frequency range beyond the one that we call the physical. And these people are literally possessed, and so that affects their behavior. So then you go into the next level, which is this reptilian connection and this interdimensional force that is behind the Illuminati, and you ask, why are they into this? And why are they working through the Illuminati for this control? And one of the themes that's come up over the years is that we are being trawled for energy, we have become or being used as an energy source for this force. Now, when you look at the Matrix movie, the first one, there was that point where the Morpheus character holds up a battery and says, the machines have turned the human race into one of these. And that really sums up this recurring theme. I mean, whether it's Credo Mutwa, whether it's people I've talked to on the inside of this, whether it's other people in different parts of the world, this has been a common theme, that what is happening on, again, another level, because it's multi-leveled and there's multi-reasons at different levels, is that we are being trawled for energy. Now, what energy? It's emotion. It's the energy we call emotion, and it's particular the low vibrational emotion that's produced by, and here we come back to the key word again, that's created by fear in all its different forms. Stress, fear, anxiety, they're all within this frequency range of low vibrational emotion, as I call it. And these entities on other dimensions, very, very close to this one, just outside the frequency range of human sight, which is very tiny when you look at how much human sight can actually access, and they are feeding off this energy. And when you have this age-old recurring theme of sacrifices to the gods, when they sacrificed people, and still do in their rituals. One of the things that they do is that they do it in a ritualistic way, again, the reptilian brain at work, and it is designed to create maximum terror in the victim. So at the point of sacrifice, you are releasing maximum terror. And what is happening is that in that same space where this is going on, outside of human sight, although in some of their rituals they can create an energy environment in which these entities can manifest, one of the reasons they do it, those entities are sucking in, absorbing the energy of fear being released by the victim. This is where the whole sacrifice to the gods thing comes from. And of course the Aztecs in Central America did it on a mass scale. But if you take it onto an understanding of the rituals that go on that aren't called rituals, like wars, that's just a ritual, a blood ritual, then things like the First World War, Second World War, and what's going on in terms of Iraq now every day, this is a constant source of massive releases of low vibrational emotional energy, fear. Not just in the people fighting the war, but the people at home are worried about the people fighting the war. The people in other countries who are worried about whether the war is going to come and start affecting them. All this is releasing this low vibrational emotion of fear, which is being absorbed by these people. So the more that we can be in a state of fear, of conflict, of division, of anxiety, the greater the source of energy is to these entities. Then you go to the next level, and you find that actually what we're living in is an illusory reality that only exists in our head and is being created on the basis of our belief in what is real. And that's another level. And then comes the question, who's controlling that? And I can't answer that at this time, but I'm sure going to before I leave here. And what we call, and of course the Matrix movies were great in the sense that they gave a visual feel for what I'm talking about. It's become more and more clear to me as the years have passed, and this is really the big focus of my research now, that we have become controlled more than anything else by being manipulated and duped into identifying who we are with this so-called physical body. Identifying who we are with our emotions and with our thoughts. And I've come to realize that our thoughts and our emotions overwhelmingly are not us. They're not the consciousness that we are beyond this illusion. They are computer programs. And when I wrote my last book, Infinite Love is the Only Truth, Everything Else is Illusion, when I'd finished it and it went off to be designed as a book, I came across this report, this document put together by Russian scientists, in which they had done a research project to try to find out what the 90-odd% of what is called junk DNA I mean, it's called junk DNA because scientists don't know what it does. People think that science has sussed what DNA is. It's not done anything of the kind. It thinks it knows what about 3 to 5% does. The rest of it calls junk DNA because they don't know what it does. They'll call it junk DNA, and then we can forget about it. It's there, just a mistake. And what they concluded in this research was that the body is a biological computer, which is exactly what I say in the book. And the biological computer is receiving and transmitting information through what we call the DNA. The DNA is a crystalline substance that receives information and transmits it. And the more that I've understood this, the more it's obvious that we live in what I call a holographic internet. If you take the analogy or the example of the internet, where you have a computer terminal someone switches on in China or South Africa or America or Britain, they're in different places. They are different computers, races, whatever you want to call them, but they are connected to the same collective reality because they're connected to the same internet. Now, we are connected through the biological computer and its central processing unit, the brain, to a holographic version of this. If you look at the internet, the only place that it exists in the form that we perceive the internet, pictures, graphics, websites, is actually on a computer screen. Everywhere else, that internet exists only as mathematical codes and electrical signals. In the same way, our reality only exists in the form we think we're seeing and experiencing, the three-dimensional world that I'm sitting in, a wall and a computer and office and bookshelves and stuff. It only exists in our brains in that form. Everywhere else, our reality is frequency fields and electrical signals. When we taste something, we taste it when an electrical signal has been transmitted from the tongue to the brain, and the brain has interpreted that signal as the taste we associate with whatever we're eating. And this is what is happening also with the way we perceive reality in general. We are decoding electrical signals and vibratory fields into a holographic reality. And just as with a computer, we are choosing which parts of the internet we go to and which parts we ignore, so on a subconscious level, our belief in what is real is editing the information we receive so that we only take that part of it that supports our belief in what is real. And this is what's happening in a hypnotic stage show. I went to a couple when I was researching the last book to observe, and what the hypnotist is doing is implanting into the stooge on the stage a belief in what is real, i.e. they're eating an apple even though they're actually eating a potato, i.e. there's an elephant in the audience, the woman next to them is naked, and all these things. And what happens is the implanted belief decodes reality to fit the belief. And there was a wonderful story to sum up what I'm saying in a book called The Holographic Universe by a guy called Michael Talbot, who told how he observed at a party held by his father this very phenomena at an extreme level, but very, very applicable to what we're talking about. He said that his father had a stage hypnotist along to do party tricks. And he eventually was with this guy called Tom, and this guy was sitting down and being given the hypnotic treatment for a bit of a laugh. And eventually the hypnotist said, when I bring you back to a waking state, you're not going to be able to see your daughter in the room. At which point he leads the daughter to stand in front of Tom, so this Tom guy's looking into her belly. He brings Tom out of the trance, or apparently so, and he says, can you see your daughter in the room? And Tom's looking around. He says, no, she's not here. She starts giggling. He can't hear her. The hypnotist then put his hand in the small of the daughter's back and said, Tom, what am I holding? And Tom looked bemused because it's obvious to him. He said, you're holding a watch. His daughter's standing between him and the watch. He said, there's an inscription on the watch. Can you read it? And he said, yeah, and he read the inscription. And the daughter is between him and the watch. Now, if you said this in the wider world to people who are taking the program of what is real and taking their reality from it. Let's say that was impossible, but it's not. It's because the only place the daughter exists in the form that Tom is seeing, i.e. a apparently three-dimensional woman, is in his head, when the frequency fields are decoded into a holographic reality that we call the physical world. Once the implanted belief is in there, in the computer, saying she's not there, it edits her out. It does not read her energy field. Therefore, when it becomes a holographic reality, she's not there anymore. And when you take this to the next level and you think that we are being hypnotized in terms of being told and implanted with a sense of reality every second of our lives through what we call the education system, through the media, massively important, the most important through television. And it's interesting also that when we're watching television, our brainwave patterns go into a similar pattern to that of hypnotic trance. So we're being hypnotized with a belief in what is real all the time, and then, having taken on that belief, we decode reality on the basis of supporting that belief. And this is why when people wake up from the trance, they talk about being awakened. They say, I woke up. I can see it now. I couldn't see it before. I can see it now. Why? Because they broke out of the trance. They woke up and they could start seeing things because they're now decoding energy fields that they weren't decoding before because the belief was stopping it. And they're now being able to see things they couldn't see before. And so this is why the Illuminati are so frightened of information that challenges their reality, or the reality they want us to have, getting into circulation. This is why throughout history the visionary has been seen as the danger to the authority of the day. It's because the visionary gives another version of possible reality. That starts to get people to see that the imposed prevailing reality is not the only possibility, and suddenly the computer starts decoding other energy fields it wasn't decoding before because the belief is breaking up, and they start to see a very different world. And this is the level beyond the banking system and corporational abuse and manipulation and political manipulation, even beyond what we call the reptilian connection to all this. This is the level that the real control is taking place, and this is the level that we need to address it, therefore. Not in stockpiling weapons to fight the Illuminati, but in breaking out of the hypnotic trance so that we can see and therefore manifest a different reality to the one that we are currently manifesting. Because at the moment we're not manifesting our reality, we're manifesting an externally imposed one that we have accepted to be real.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of information, David. I guess the one thing I was going back, and this is going a ways back into what you were talking about, but you talked about these low frequency, the low frequency fear that's fed upon.
Yep.
Does that mean that the opposite is true for things like love, for things like caring for one another, for things like does that destroy that? Do they not like that? Can they not feed off that? Is that a non-low frequency emotion?
That's not, and that is the difference between what we call love in its true sense, what I call infinite love, because we've lost the true meaning of love. We often talk about, we all the time talk about love, when love is an electrochemical reaction that means we are attracted to certain people. We call it love because we get this feeling that we like, and often we'll get a burst of this electrochemical reaction when we meet someone and when we first start going out with them, and then we'll talk about the love has faded, the love has died. What's changed is the electrochemical reaction is now not taking place. Therefore, you are not feeling the same. Now, that's one level of what we call love, and it's not love in its true sense. Love in its true sense is that love never dies. True love never dies. You always love, and it's a level of love that, because of the manipulation and because of the identification with the computer instead of the consciousness, the infinite consciousness, we have fallen for the idea of electrochemical love instead of infinite love, which is love for all, no matter what. In terms of the electrochemical love, and in terms of the sexual love, if you like, they can feed off that. They love the energy produced by, if you like, physical sex. Not that there's anything wrong with that, nothing wrong at all. But I mean, everyone to their own. It can be very nice. I've tried it. But they can feed off that. But what they can't feed off, because it is beyond their vibrational capacity to do so, and if they fed off it, they would be transformed anyway. Is this level of love where you love because that's the only thing that you can ever possibly think of doing. Even those that do ill towards you, you still love them because you understand that there is no we. If you go beyond this apparent realm of manufactured division, there is only one infinite I. Because when I'm sitting here, there seems to be empty space between me and this wall. But no. There's only energy vibrating at a speed that is beyond my physical sight frequency range, so I can't see it, but I can feel it. If I go into a room where there's been really, really unpleasant things go on, I and other people will go in there and we'll go, "Oh, goodness me, this is horrible in here." Or we'll go into a room where there's been a children's party and lots of fun and lots of joy, and we won't even know that that's happened, but we'll go into the room and we'll go, "Hey, what a lovely place, what a nice atmosphere." Atmosphere is this energy field that we cannot see with our sight because of the frequency problem, but we can feel, and we feel it all the time. And this is the infinite energy field that connects all things. So we're not divided. We only appear to be divided. And so if we don't love all, then we cannot truly love ourselves, because we are all. We may identify with a droplet of water symbolically, but the droplet, when you drop it in the ocean, where does the droplet end and the ocean start? There is no division. The droplet is the ocean is the droplet. And it's the same with this infinite energy field consciousness that I talk about. And what's happened is our identification with the biological computer, instead of infinite consciousness, has given us a belief in, therefore an experience of, illusory division. And the way out of here is to start identifying with being the infinite consciousness, all that is, ever has been, ever will be, indeed ever can be, and not with David Icke or Joe Bloggs or Bill Smith or Ethel Jones, which is just a computer program which we either control through coming from a point of view of consciousness, or are controlled by when we identify with it and allow its reactions to control our behavior. Because I've said in my books, and I believe this to be the case after years of research and of observation, most people are actually being controlled not by consciousness, but by the computer program we call the body, the brain body. I mean, if our emotions come from our level of consciousness, then we would be in control of our emotions. We would decide what those emotions are. But what happens, of course, is it's an electrochemical process. When we feel an emotion, it produces certain chemicals in the body related to that emotion. In the same way, when we have access to certain chemicals in food, in drink, and also through electromagnetic interference, we are then affected emotionally by that. This is why so many people have reported when they live next to power lines, power cables, and mobile phone masts and other electromagnetic transmissions. They've reported in large numbers in ratio to the population of feeling depressed. And the depression comes from the effect that the chemicals and the electromagnetic fields are having on their biological computer. There was a case in Britain came up last year where this lady had been clinically depressed for 40 years. She'd been in institutions. There was nothing anyone could do for her. Every day she woke up, she was in a deep, deep depression. Then after 40 years, someone said to her, have you ever thought what happened around the time this depression started? And the only thing she could think of was that she'd had a large number of teeth filled with amalgam fillings, i.e. mercury, just before the depression kicked in. 40 years later, after thinking about this, she went and had all the amalgams taken out and others put in, and she went on a mercury detox. And after 40 years, her depression disappeared because it was chemically induced through mercury, which, of course, they've been putting in vaccines all these years. And so what we call emotion and thought, too, is an electrochemical reaction. It's not who we are. We are infinite consciousness that's above all that stuff. And we might choose to come in here and experience it, just a bit of experience and all the rest of it, but we've got trapped in it. We've got trapped with identifying who we are with it. It's like a guy on the moon identifying who he is with his spacesuit. We think that was crazy. Well, that's what we're doing. And that's how we got into this mess, and understanding that's how we got into this mess is the key to getting out of it.
Oh.
Wow. Well, David, I know we're running low on time here now, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
And we'd love to have you back in the future when maybe we can have some more time and talk more openly.
That would be great.
All right.
It's great to have you, David.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.